There are folks from Appalachia who become famous as businessmen, preachers, entertainers, and writers, and as politicians. Today, we're going to take a virtual trip to West Virginia to tell you about a famous native of that state who made his mark by following his dream of flying like the birds. Hello, folks. I'm Steve Gilley, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia.
You know, Steve, I've been looking forward to this script for a long time and being able to sit down and talk about just one man that has absolutely, it seems like, done everything there is that he could have possibly done. And I will give everybody a hint out there. If you don't know who we're talking about just yet, I will throw in a little bit of trivia. He was one of the forefathers of the astronauts.
Indeed, he was. And he has lived a life 10 men couldn't have lived.
Right.
And the fellow we're talking about is named Charles Elwood Yeager, but you know him better as Chuck Yeager. And Chuck Yeager was born February 13th, 1923 in Myra, West Virginia, to Albert Howe Yeager and his wife Susie May. Now, when Charles was 5, the family moved to Hamlin, where he graduated from Hamlin High School. And in his time there, he played basketball and football, while also getting good grades in, of all things, geometry. He also attended the Citizens Military Training Camp in Indianapolis for 2 summers, 1939 and 1940.
Well, Chuck Yeager graduated from Hamlin High School in June of 1941. And 3 months later, on September 12th, he enlisted as a private in the U.S. Army Air Forces and was assigned to be an aircraft mechanic at George Air Force Base in Victorville, California. At the time he joined the service, Yeager wasn't eligible for flight training, which is really what he was interested in. You see, prior to the Second World War, the U.S. Army Air Forces had pretty high standards for their pilots. They had to be mature, certainly older than 18, and they had to have more education than Chuck Yeager possessed. The attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese in December of 1941 changed all of that.
Yeah, there was suddenly a need for pilots to fight the war in the Pacific and the war in Europe, so the Army Air Force began to loosen those restrictions, enough for Yeager to get in. It also helped that he had near-perfect vision at, get this, Rod, 2010.
Wow.
One story goes that he once was able to bag a deer at 600 yards.
I can believe that.
He graduated from flight school on March 10th, 1943 at Luke Field in Arizona. And after graduation, he trained as a fighter pilot, flying Bell P-39 Airacobras before shipping off to England on November 23rd, 1943. Now, it's said, Rod, that during his training on the Bell P-39, Yeager was grounded for a week for coming in low and clipping a farmer's tree during a training flight.
Sounds like something out of Top Gun or something when they buzzed the aircraft carrier there with Top Gun, but still, well, he was much of a daredevil, I'm sure, but Chuck Yeager was stationed at RAF Leiston, where he flew P-51 Mustangs in combat, naming his own plane after his girlfriend, Glennis Faye Dickhouse. And that's who he married in February of 1945. Now, if you don't know where I'm going with this, remember Glamorous Glennis.
Mm-hmm.
He was shot down over France on March 5th, 1944, during his 8th mission, but he managed to escape to Spain by the end of the month with the help of, get this, the Maquis, the French resistance. Now, he helped build, helped the Maquis build homemade bombs during that time, a skill that he learned from his father back in West. How do you go and learn how to build homemade bombs in West Virginia?
Well, Rod, have you not heard? We blowed them up real good. Yeah.
That's right. And, Blair Mountain, these sort of things, I'm sure. So, well, Yeager helped a B-24 Navigator escape with him over the Pyrenees after the Navigator had his leg nearly shot off. He cut the thin bit of tendon holding the leg on with a knife and then got him over to the mountains to safety in Spain, for which Yeager received the Bronze Star.
Well, he continued to fly missions with his 61st and final mission on January 15th, 1945, after which he was sent home to the United States with his pregnant wife and a commission as a captain. Well, the family settled on an assignment at Wright Field in order to be close to West Virginia, where he became a test pilot of repaired aircraft. And that led to his assignment to Muroc Army Airfield, now known as Edwards Air Force Base in California, where he became a full-fledged test pilot following graduation from Air Materiel Command Flight Performance School. He was set for an exciting, if unglamorous, career until greed changed all that. You see, there was a Bell aircraft test pilot named Chalmers Goodland who was set to try to break the sound barrier in 1947. Now, Chalmers, known by his nickname of Slick, turned out to be, well, just a little too slick for his own good. He demanded $150,000 from the Army Air Force to pilot the rocket-powered Bell X-1 in a program to research high-speed flight. And just so you know, Rod, $150,000 in 1947 is the same as $1.7 million today.
Wow.
And the government was not about to pay that kind of money to a test pilot. So they looked around and found their own, much cheaper, competent pilot, Chuck Yeager. He was selected to fly the X-1, and the date was set October 14th, 1947.
Well, fate wasn't done with Captain Yeager by no means. 2 nights before the flight, Yeager was on a horse ride when he fell off, breaking 2 ribs. Fate, though, wasn't as tough as this pilot. He went into Rosamond to see a civilian doctor who taped up his ribs. He kept quiet about the accident, only telling Glennis, his wife, and one other pilot in the program, Jack Ridley. On the day of the flight, Yeager was in so much pain from the injury, he couldn't seal the X-1's hatch alone. So Ridley helped him rig up a system involving a broom handle so he could get the hatch sealed. And it also brings back another big favorite line that I have from The Right Stuff. Hey, Ridley, you got a stick of Beemans? Well, loan me some and I'll pay you back when we're next time we're on the ground or something. He took off in the X-1, which Yeager christened the Glamorous Glennis, and hit Mach 1.05 at 45,000 feet over the Mojave Desert. The feat was kept quietly until the following June, when he was awarded the McKay Trophy and the Collier Trophy for his accomplishment. That plane is on permanent display, and I must say that I've seen it at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum.
Well, he continued his test pilot career, breaking several other altitude and speed records. He was also one of the first American pilots to fly a Russian-made MiG-15, which made its way into American hands during the Korean War when a North Korean pilot defected to the South. He also flew the chase plane for Jackie Cochran, the first woman to break the sound barrier in 1953. On November 20th, 1953, the U.S. Navy sent its pilot, Scott Crossfield, up in a D-558-2 skyrocket, where he became the first human being to travel at twice the speed of sound. Well, Rod, that record didn't hold for long thanks to Chuck Yeager and Jack Ridley. The 2 men set up a series of test flights called Operation NACA Weep, and the 2 of them managed to beat Crossfield's record with a speed of Mach 2.44 on December 12, 1953. They had the record as the fastest men alive, but that last part, alive, was about to be tested, wasn't it, Rod?
Yes, it was, Steve, because shortly after hitting Mach 2.44, the X-1A went out of control at 80,000 feet. The plane began to roll, pitch, and yaw out of control all at once. Yeager, who was the pilot, dropped 51,000 feet in less than a minute before he managed to regain control of the craft at 29,000 feet, then landed without any further incident. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for this in 1954. He held several commands over the coming years all around the world. Captain Yeager became Colonel Yeager in 1962 when he became the first commandant of the United States Air Force Aerospace Research Pilot School, producing astronauts for NASA. Now, he couldn't become an astronaut because he only had a high school education. He did, though, complete 5 test flights for NASA between December 1963 and January 1964, but an accident in one of those flights put an end to his record attempts.
In 1966, Yeager took command of the 405th Tactical Fighter Wing at Clark Air Base in the Philippines, overseeing flights from there to North Vietnam. He also took part in some 414 hours of combat time and 127 missions in a B-57 light bomber. On June 22, 1969, Colonel Yeager became Brigadier General Yeager, and he was assigned as the Vice Commander of the 17th Air Force. Yeager was assigned to Pakistan as an advisor to the Pakistani Air Force from 1971 to 1973, and on one occasion, his plane, a Beechcraft, was destroyed while it was parked at Islamabad Airport by an Indian air raid.
Well, General Yeager retired from the military on March 1st, 1975, after 33 years of active duty. Now, let me just tell you, folks, he appeared in the movie The Right Stuff as a bartender. He also appeared in numerous AC Delco ads during the 1980s. Gosh, I remember those. What was it? There was one line in there that I think he always, buckle your GM life belt.
Yeah, something like that.
I think that's what it was,
that.
something like that. And was a technical advisor for 3 Electronic Arts flight simulator video games, which bore his name. On the 50th anniversary of his record-breaking flight, he did it again in an F-15D Eagle.
Well, that's not the only time he did that. On October 14th, 2012, Chuck Yeager did it again at the age of 89 as a co-pilot on a McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. He's been inducted into the International Air and Space Hall of Fame, the International Space Hall of Fame, and the Aerospace Walk of Honor. Yeager Airport in Charleston, West Virginia is named after him. And there is a bridge on Interstate 64 and Interstate 77 that is named in his honor. And this happened because, well, he flew an airplane underneath that bridge once. And that prompted West Virginia to change it from the Kanawha River Bridge to the Chuck E. Yeager Bridge.
That sounds a lot like John Paul Riddle flying under the bridge at Pikeville that time we did the podcast. So.
Indeed. Well, Glennis died in 1990. And Rod, as you probably know, he's also the cousin of former Dodgers catcher Steve Yeager, also born in West Virginia.
Wow. Well, I did, and I didn't know that, but I'm glad to be getting it from a sports authority like you, Steve.
Oh, well, if you're relying on me for sports, you are sadly hurting. That's all I can say.
Wow. I just can't say this enough about Chuck Yeager. I mean, when I first heard about the Right Stuff movie, they gave him enough time in there. But of course, most of the Right Stuff focused on those 7 Mercury astronauts. Yeah. But you also had to figure out, how did they get there? And then in the movie, there was the constant competition. There was Yeager, Scott Crossfield, some of the other test pilots. And, I don't know if you remember this or not, Steve. All the time when I watched that movie, do you remember the Man in Black?
It's been a while since I've seen the movie. I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure.
There's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of symbolism in the Right Stuff. And there's one part where, of course, Chuck Yeager goes up and he's able to break the sound barrier and so forth. But before he does it, you see a man, an older man in a black hat, black coat, pants, tie, as he's walking across the tarmac there where they're filming this. And it's supposed to be Edwards Air Force Base. And he's supposed to be the symbol of death in that. And, he avoids that, in certain things. And, he shows back up again a little bit later on. He shows up, I think, at one of the Mercury launches, too. I think when John Glenn's getting ready to go up, he shows up also. But, that movie is just so great. And Sam Shepard did such a wonderful job as Chuck Yeager in that movie. And, I think of another great line, too, when they were talking about the astronaut program, and Sam Shepard throws in there, he says, anybody goes up in the damn thing, spam in the can.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Yeager. Just to hear it that way, it reminds me of something Yeager might have said, because, you're risking your life to do this, but hey, it's part of the job.
Well, the thing I like about Chuck Yeager is he started off from basically nothing, working class.
Right.
and worked his way up to be an international celebrity, someone who accomplished something, breaking the sound barrier,
Hmm.
and someone who had fun doing it their entire life.
Right.
Yeah, and made himself into a legend. Well,
Mm.
folks, that's the story of the man who broke the sound barrier, Chuck Yeager, West Virginia native and part of the history of this place we call home, Appalachia. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to the Stories podcast, at least the audio version, at Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Radio Public, Spotify, TuneIn, Deezer, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also catch the video version of our podcast on YouTube. Be sure to click that subscribe button and give us a like if you don't mind. Till next we meet, so long, everybody.
So long.